And we're live. Well, not quite live. We are recording. Okay, well, this is our first ever podcast. We are doing it for the sole reason to annoy the people of the internet with our shit voices. But yeah, so we came up with the idea to do this, mainly to practice some skills, to get on this podcast hype, and to just record some of the interesting conversations that we're having. So this is our platform for doing that.
Yeah.
I'm Paul and that's Mo.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of partly started, we'd just come back from the holiday and we're kind of discussing like what we're going to try and do this year, like how is this year going to be a bit different, and then we kind of spoke about starting a book club together, and just kind of, I guess the mantra, maybe more personally for me but also for Paul, is kind of do what you set out to do. And so we're just trying to, we've spoken about doing a podcast before, we've spoken about hit this and that, and we're just like, yeah, we want to do a book club, let's just do it. So we've essentially finished the first month's book. We
finished our January book.
Yeah.
But Mo, as predicted, was late.
Only by an hour, which is fine, better than my record for last year's book club, which was like
half
one
finished book. Okay, so the book we have read for this January is a book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. It is a book, it's a red book. We have quite mixed opinions on this book. We've already done the first half in a discussion, non-podcasted discussion, so we're actually talking about the second half in more depth. So yeah, I say we just get straight into it.
Yeah.
So what's the book about, Mo? What's the general idea of the book?
So it's kind of, if I was to, and maybe this is a good practice, if we were to each kind of give a summary of the book, just what we feel like it is, what we feel like we got out of it, I'd say it's an interesting read. I think what I picked out from it was a lot of really good quotes and a lot of really, it was almost like, finding diamonds in the rough almost in a lot of places. So I wouldn't say that, I know sometimes I felt like, some of the chapters didn't have that much sort of in them, but I feel like maybe one step to reading the book is actually trying to be open about yourself. That's, the book is called Ego is the Enemy. You have to try and, put your ego aside whilst reading it, essentially.
I think Mo is being very polite, and I think I've been much more direct with how I feel about the book, which is that I think, although the underlying ideas are quite nice, and there are some little gems in there, I think it's shrouded in a swamp of bullshit, essentially. I feel he's taken many interesting points and tried to spin and oversimplify some examples and case studies around it. But anyway, we'll probably get to that in due course. But so what from the second half of the book, what's the first thing that stood out to you?
From the second half?
Yeah, so the first chapter was always stay a student.
Yeah, always stay a student. Well, I guess it would help to say that the book is split up into three phases of apparently your life. And so he calls these aspiration, success and failure. And the book basically outlines how ego can get in the way, can disrupt, can pull you back in any of these phases of your life. And whether it's the aspiration phase, it can cloud your aspiration. It can make you actually think that what you want to achieve is something, but it's actually just, what he'll say is, your ego is telling you want to get that. And in fact, it's actually this. Same thing with success. in success, it's more about how people who have success either had to put their ego aside to get there, or they sort of have almost lost success because of their ego. So it goes, I mean, and then failure is just about how, you know, everybody fails, but certain people's ego causes them to fail, and certain people get through the failure because they put their ego aside. I mean, I guess what Paul was saying was, it's almost like it's a self-help kind of book, self-helpy kind of book. And then it's like, how do I differentiate this book between, like, how almost the author asking himself, how do I make sure this is seen differently to other people's books? And then he kind of looks at it from a viewpoint of, let's relate everything to ego.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So the first point, which I feel is quite a moot point, it's always stay a student. And in this chapter, he talks about Genghis Khan, and the essence is, as you progress, just don't stop learning. Keep learning new things, keep adapting, keep looking around you. And I think this is quite a platitude, really. It's quite like an obvious point, in my opinion. It's just like, just keep learning, which is sort of obvious. But I guess the point he's trying to say is, don't think you're sick because you're doing quite well. Keep adapting, keep growing, keep striving, which I think is a valid point, but I don't find it novel in the slightest. And I have nothing to say about the matter. Nothing polite to say about the matter.
Well, I mean, is it the something Kruger effect? Is it Don Kruger?
Freddy Krueger?
No. But it's like the whole people who have a lot of knowledge in a field, like, would say that they don't have much knowledge, whereas people who have much knowledge in a field,
I see what you mean. Yeah,
think that they're like sick. They think they've got all the knowledge, right?
Yeah, no.
So
it's like to
be honest, I think this is probably one of the chapters that was more like, you know how you said, or we've said, that he often will relate something to ego. I think this is probably one of the ones that makes sense. There are some that don't make sense, but this one does. Like, you know, it's easy to, like, it is. I think always stay a student is like you said, it's not revolutionary. Like everyone says that, right?
Yeah.
But it's more about where's the gap between the saying and the actual implementation. The gap is, you can say that, but then your ego gets in the way of you thinking, oh, actually, you know what, I do know quite a bit, I don't need to learn, you know. Whereas somebody who can almost dispel that is then constantly just thinking, how can I learn new things, how can I stay current?
No, yeah, for sure.
So I mean, I think it's...
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid point. I think it's definitely not a wrong point, but your point of the Freddy Krueger effect, like, that is pretty true, because I think a lot of people, when they start doing, say, a new hobby, and they start doing it a bit, they think they've really learnt. They think that they're progressing quite well. But the more you do something, the more you realise the enormity of how much you don't know. And I think that's kind of a point here. All right, that's a boring one. If we kind of zoom forward a bit, there's one point that I found really interesting in Beware a Disease of Me. He talks about the innocent climb.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, he does. I mean, you know, I wouldn't say be put off of this if you don't like sports, but he does make a lot of sporting analogies. I guess they are easy ones for people to understand.
They're quite clear and quick, I guess. So the innocent climb is regarding a basketball team. Is that right? Miami Heat? No, wait. What's the team? Anyway, there was a basketball team who... Wait, was it even a basketball team? I forget.
I don't,
no, it's page 133.
Yeah, it's...
Miami Heat.
Yeah, that's a basketball team.
Essentially,
And the Los Angeles Lakers.
the idea is when you say start a startup, or you start a team, or you start a new project, and you have several members in that team. At the beginning, you kind of enter a period called the innocent climb, as stated by Ryan Holiday, whereby you're just all in it for it, and you're just building this thing, and the idea is you climb and you get better and better, and you kind of have this quite pure rise to some success. But he contrasts the innocent climb with whatever comes next, which is when things start to break down. People's like egos start to come in, and people's opinions of how things should be run, and people's need for recognition. All these things can dilute the purity of what was originally there, and lead to miscommunication and people not being content with the share they're getting or whatever.
Yeah, no, I did like that one because it is very true, and I guess it's like it almost makes the current Golden State Warriors team, they've quite a team with quite a few superstars, almost kind of quite a big achievement in the sense that they've managed to keep together a team even after the innocent climb, and I guess that has to be something down to they've still bought into the team sort of more like ethic and team sort of mentality, yeah,
morale and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, because you mentioned as well, who is it? Shaq and Kobe.
Yeah,
Shaq and Kobe. They can't play together. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was they were together, and then they kind of split up, and it was essentially like the LA Lakers had to choose one out of the two of them.
Okay,
and we know who they chose. So yeah, but what else? I mean, what else did you take out of Beware the Disease of Me? Was that?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing I find about that point is that imagine if me and you started some startup or firm or a podcast or something, we might be currently in the foothills of the innocent climb, right? And it might come down the line where we may need to start thinking in a very structured way and make a concerted effort to manage these things, And so I found that a very interesting point, and I'm quite curious as to whether that is a common occurrence. I can imagine it being so, and I guess it'd be interesting to see what is the best route forward for these particular situations. Is culling, I guess it depends on the situation, but perhaps culling people is indeed the best thing for the project. Or you go, you know what, we want to stay together as a team and stick with the team, even though it may not be the most efficient or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I guess it would just depend on the situation, but I feel like maybe it's almost like once you get to the top of the climb, like say you win your first championship, or you get first round funding or something, whatever, for your startup, right? And then you kind of like, when it's gone from just a dream or just something you're working on in the basement or whatever, right? Then it's almost like, guys, like, we're kind of actually really going to go for this. Like, it's not, this isn't the innocent climb anymore. You almost have to gather people together and say, like, we have to discuss how we're going to continue this, how we're going to take it forward.
Yeah.
Like, how we avoid.
Yeah. And I think by then you've also invested a lot of your time and your emotions, and you have your opinions probably will start to differ on many topics, like how it should be run, how advertising should be, or how whatever these things might look like, and people might disagree. So I guess that is potentially an interesting phenomena that young startuppers will need to think about, I guess. So I thought that was interesting. What else was in the Disease of Me?
I thought it was the one that was about the story that we tell ourselves, but I feel like that was in that was in the first half.
The story that we tell ourselves. That sounds like a spire, but I think there might be another one in here.
No, it was the chapter.
Oh, here we go. Don't tell yourself a story.
Yeah, was that the first half or?
No, that's like the next one after Always Stay a Student.
Oh, okay.
What's this one about? Basically, just don't think you're sick, because chances are you're not. And I think that's a very valid point. I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I kind of noted was like, it says writing our own narrative leads to arrogance. It turns our life into a story and turns us into caricatures. I mean, it's almost like, you know, when we write our own story, we cut out the bits that we don't like, you know?
Yeah, but I would disagree with that.
Really?
I think. Well, because this is a typical example of him having a nice idea, trying to phrase it in a certain way and be like, that sounds good, don't tell yourself a story. Well, it's like, you could tell yourself a story if it's an accurate story. If you look at the world and be like, okay, I'm actually good at XYZ, but I'm really bad at ABC. So part of me defining my own narrative is understanding my strengths and weaknesses and progressing forwards with a narrative that makes sense. See what I mean? Because this to me just doesn't make any sense. Like, if you don't write your own narrative, then who the fuck is? Like, what are you going to do? Like, you need to have some steer on who you are and who you would like to be. And you do that by understanding yourself and setting goals, I guess, if you like, or by steering your actions towards a certain way so that eventually you become whatever it is.
You're almost talking about present stories instead of past stories. I think maybe he's, like, in particular this one talks about past events.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess the other thing with maybe potentially future stories is that, you know, like, through this creation of a story, we then, like, you know, we'll then think that the success we achieve has to be akin to that story. It's like, you know, I was going to have 30 million by the age of 30, and then if you've got 20, then you're like, oh, like, I haven't made it. Or, you know, I'm going to be CEO of my own company, and then you haven't done that as well. And then, you know, you start to say, oh, this future story which I've written, it's like, you know, it's not what I wanted, even though you may actually have success.
Yeah. I think, okay, I do see his point about looking back at your past successes and not inflating them to mean that, to not over-exaggerate your successes, I think, and to not take them to heart. I think that's a valid point. In terms of future stuff, I mean, I think it's always just about being realistic, you know? You be realistic about yourself, about what you're doing now, what you've done wrong in the past, what you've done right in the past. Like, one thing in, like, British culture, say, that I really dislike is how very often you're not allowed to praise yourself, you know? Even if you've done something kind of right. Often the case, not always. But, like, you're always meant to kind of demean yourself just a bit, because that's polite. You just be a bit over humble to be polite, which I think in day-to-day conversation maybe it's okay, but I think the point is you want to be realistic about what you've done and what you've not done.
But then, I mean, I guess it's not just, I mean, it is part of like British culture, but isn't it also something he discusses in the book about, you know, humility even in success? Like, you know, what do you get out of not being humble?
What do you get out of not being humble?
Yeah.
No. Well, always be humble, but don't, I think what I'm trying to say is, don't overplay your wins and don't underplay your wins either, but don't overplay your failures either, and don't underplay your failures. You see what I mean? Be accurate. You make mistakes.
Okay.
You make mistakes. You're bad at things, and you're good at things. Be like, okay, I'm actually not so bad at that, at this, you know? I've still got a long way to go in order to be actually good, but I'm like not so bad at it, you know? And I think it's important to have a realistic grasp of what you are. And that's really quite hard to do. I don't even know that if that's if that's an interesting point or not.
No, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair point.
Alright, anyways. What's important to you? So the next chapter, what's important to you? I think that this is a huge chapter. Well, this is a huge point. And it's a thing I've been asking myself for, like, over 10 years now. Which is like, what do you really want? Because in my mind, I always thought, if I knew what I wanted, I could just go and fight for it. But oftentimes I just wouldn't even know what I really wanted. I think my kind of current definition of things has evolved and gone better over time. But yeah, I think it's a huge thing. It's like, I mean, if you figure that out, then you know your direction.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then you're a bit stuck.
According to Robert Louis Stevenson, to know what you like is the beginning of wisdom and of old age.
I'm getting old, mate.
Yeah,
that's why I can't drink as much anymore, because I figured out what I want.
I mean, one of the things I mean, it's, again, sometimes these things are a bit obvious, but just reading them sometimes is interesting. Like, all of us waste precious life doing things we don't like to prove ourselves to people we don't respect and to get things we don't want. I was just kind of like, you know, I guess to a certain extent, yeah, we do quite a fair bit of that.
It might be wise to not keep keep the book in the way of this thing. Yeah.
And then the other thing I thought was, he speaks about competitiveness and that it is important. And so it's almost, he kind of says, like, don't like, just know, like, understand where you sit, what you're competing for, who you're competing with. So yeah, know who you're competing with and why. And I think the why is the stress here. Like, you know, if you know who you're competing with, but you don't know why you're competing with them, then what's the point, you know? And just, yeah, so I thought, because, yeah, I'm generally quite competitive, but then sometimes, I guess. But
if you're on a deadline, you're not not the slightest.
Well, not, as in, with a deadline, you're competing against yourself, really. You're not competing against anyone else, apart from a grade. But yeah, but then sometimes when you lose focus of the why, you can almost just be like, okay, but it doesn't matter if that person beats me, because I'm just, like, not bothered.
Yeah, but I mean, how about in life? Because one thing that I have been doing for years now is I ask myself, what do I really want? And then I ask myself, why? Why do I want this? Why do I want that? Why do I have this feeling about this? Just keep going down layers. And my conclusion, well, I won't tell you my conclusion yet, but, like, do you know what drives you? What is it that drives you? Like, why do you want the things that you want? Or firstly, do you know what you want?
I don't think I know what I want.
Okay, so then, end of conversation.
Alright, podcast is done. Mo's exiting the room. No, I mean, it's like, it's harder to, I feel like knowing what you want is, you know, like you said, it's something that is sometimes difficult to form into a coherent idea, and maybe it doesn't need to be, you know. I think one of the things I want to do is do something, whether it's my day-to-day job or a project, that helps people. But then, you know, is the person who I am right now, is that the living embodiment of what I want? Do I go around and whenever I'm out, do I always try and help people? I don't. So is that really what I want? Why do I want to do that? It's all questions that,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I think that's another interesting point. Like, one thing that I sometimes think about, and I had a chat with a colleague recently about this, and she kind of gave me an interesting perspective. But like, one thing that I found quite interesting was when the Paris attacks happened. This can be a bit controversial maybe, but when the Paris attacks happened and everyone changed their Facebook picture to the French flag thing, like, I kind of came up with a notion that most of these people don't actually care at all. Because in my view, if you really care about these things, you would have at least written one letter to your MP. How many people have written a letter to the MP about terrorism, or about whatever, about climate change? How many times have you written a letter about these kind of things? Like, often I'll sign Avaz things, like Avaz petitions, but I won't share them, because sharing them is a bit lame. If I'm honest, like, these my insecurities, But then does that imply that I not actually care? So I think that is another interesting insight. It's like, you might think you know what you want. I want world peace because, yeah, but what the fuck have you done for it? Probably nothing. You want climate change to be to stop, but like, what have you actually done? Maybe climate change is a kind of a worse example, because you probably do recycling, you probably do this, you might work in an industry where you can reduce your emissions or whatever. But at the end of the day, the things that you really want, are you pushing for them? So I think, that kind of came, that kind of a development in my thinking, I suppose. You list the things that you want, but do you really want them? So that's when it gets a bit...
So what's important to you?
What's important to me?
It's a big question.
It is a big question. I think I've come to realise the things that are important to me, I've got several. One is health, because without health you can't do anything. So that's an absolute foundational thing. Two, I suppose I'll start with things that I guess I have and I'm happy with, and then I move on to things I don't have and that I want and I feel are a void in me. So the things I have are a job that I really like, work that I enjoy. I think arguably it lacks kind of substance, or it lacks excitement on some level. Like, if we were just do a startup, that'd be exciting, we feel we're on the edge of something. But overall, I really like my job. I have hobbies that I really enjoy. And I think these are key components. But I think there are two big things that I'm lacking. And I think they're absolutely fundamental to living a good life, i.e., what do I want in my life? One of them being having a community of people around you that are like a tribe to you.
Plug for the next book. Little plug for the next book.
What's it called? Foreshadowing.
What?
Foreshadowing,
Foreshadowing, oh, okay.
In movies, when it's like, they'll show a character will be an extra, or like something will happen,
yeah.
But you won't really see it, and then they'll introduce it later on. Anyway, apparently it's meant to cement more, so you see it and it's more familiar. It's like, oh, I almost feel like I know this person for some reason. Anyway, so one is a sense of a community, but a real community, a really tight community of, like that fucking Yow Will Smith video, to have people around you that genuinely believe in the similar things that you do, that are your really tight mates, like really close friends. That's something I feel that I lack, and I want to build, I guess. And secondly is what I'm calling just being good at life, or what I'm saying, the art of life, which is what is a good life. I think if you have the basics covered, the next thing to do is to be able to enjoy your moments, your day-to-day moments. Like, how do you really get the most out of the day? How do you really enjoy that breakfast or the afternoon or the chat with the dude in the shop or whatever. How do you really suck the marrow out of life, you know? And I think that is a skill. So that's something that I think I'm not that good at. I'm good at thinking abstract shit, but I'm not good at like really, really enjoying my life on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's, in my view, what it is, I think. Because I think fundamentally life is meaningless in many ways, and you have to create your own little meaning in your little microcosm of the human, you know? Because if you die, nothing's going to change. If humans die, nothing's going to change. If London blew up, nothing's going to change. So ultimately it's kind of, in a way, meaningless, but you need to create your own kind of thing. And I think that's a key point, to have just a life filled with joy. Good people, obviously family, good work, stuff that you'd like to do, and all tied together with this skill of how to make the most of this crazy roller coaster.
But I mean, at the same time, you know, maybe what pulls your joy out of day-to-day life is doing the things that you want to do. Like,
of course, yeah.
You know, for some people who they might be 99% happy, if you could measure happiness, say, maybe they don't ever really get any enjoyment out of breakfast, because breakfast to them is just, you know, a means. It is what allows them to keep going in the day and to go out and do what they want to do, whether that's, you know, being a doctor or being, you know, a lawyer or, you know, owning a shop, whatever it is.
Yeah, sure.
Breakfast is, I mean,
no, of course.
They don't dislike it, but they just don't necessarily feel the need to enjoy it because they can get joy out of other parts of their life.
No, sure. I mean, as I say, I think having a good job is definitely a key component. But I think there is more to it. I think it's like, ooh, cheeky. I think I lost my train of thought now.
Maybe somebody
What were we
should
saying?
reignite that.
No, I think
Anyone got a matchbox?
okay. But it's like this: you do a job that you like, but you're really socially awkward and you can't chat to your team, and because you have a bad relationship with the team around you, you can't make the most of your job. So one component is having good relationships with the people around you, and I think one way of having good relationships with people is to just be a joyful person, to just exude out happiness and good vibes and jokes and interesting things and care for the people around you. I think that takes almost an ability, because often you can be feeling a bit shit, or you can be feeling, you know, like you don't really give a shit, a bit indifferent to the world. But anyway, that's kind of my viewpoint on it. We don't need to go too much into it. But yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we return to the book?
We should. Meditate on the immensity. I thought I found this quote really interesting, and this is what I'm talking about when I said that I kind of, you know, it was an all right, decent-ish book, but there were a lot of kind of quotes that I enjoyed throughout it, and this is one of them. Evagrius Ponticus said, "A monk is a man who is separated from all and who is in harmony with all."
Okay.
So, as in, I just found that quite interesting, like how, I guess it's that kind of contrast. It's that you don't need to be, you can be at one with everything around you, but you don't necessarily have to be, you can be separated from that. You know, it's like, it's the whole, you know, a lot of the time it's like, oh, you know, walk in somebody else's shoes and you might understand. But a monk is, you know, supposedly able to understand, be at harmony with everything around them. But at the same time, they could be somebody in, you know, just like alone in a room, just thinking about it all. Do you know what I mean?
Not quite. No. Could you?
Did you get the quote or not really? Did you just?
I think I did not get the quote. A monk is a man who's separated from all and who is in harmony with all. I mean, isn't that kind of a Buddhist reference? It's like a detachment from your material existence, yet you still be part of it. I think that can be interpreted in many ways, and I think you can argue it to be very interesting if you spin it into your own microcosm. So, what's spinning in your micro?
Well, no, it's just the. I mean, meditate on the immensity. Even though it did feel a bit cliched. It is that kind of. I mean, sometimes you'll go to somewhere like a place, especially kind of. I don't know. It's easier when it's in nature, and you'll just be like, wow, like, it's crazy how vast and huge the world is, and like. I'm just a tiny little being, floating around, and what he argues in this chapter is that connection is so vital to us as human beings, but also to our humility and not thinking that we're like some big kind of name or big person that can do whatever the heck they want.
Yeah.
So. I don't know. It's just it resonated with me because of just I love nature.
Well, I mean, I agree with that point, but I think you kind of went off the quote and kind of delved into the chapter.
Yeah. For sure.
As in, I agree with the chapter. Like, you should be aware of the immense, utter confusion that is reality, the pure, blissful, ununderstandable, reality that is our existence, and you should understand the scale of that. You should do whatever you can, whatever you need to do to get back to a state of understanding, whether it be go into nature or looking at the stars or take illicit substances to, but I think whatever it is, I think it's a totally valid point. It's a totally humbling point. Totally think a good thing that you should be doing, basically.
One quote I didn't get was, "Every man is a quotation from all his ancestors." It was so he says, he's talking about he says, in those moments we have a sense of the immensity of the world. Ego is impossible because we realize, if only fleetingly, what Emerson meant when he said that every man is a quotation from all his ancestors. They are part of us. We are part of a tradition. Embrace the power of this position and learn from it.
I think he's saying we're just a blip in a massive chain that is this crazy shit. As in, I think he's saying.
But it's the quotation that's like, it's like, does that mean we are? Like we're just something that has just been said by somebody else, Is that what we are?
No, I quite like the fact that, by the way, Mo, like you said, there's a lot of quotes I like in this book. You read them, you don't know, and you can't explain. You can't explain why you like.
Well, no, this one I didn't get. I literally just didn't get it.
Okay,
I was just like,
no, I think it's kind of like, of all our ancestors, I think his implications, we are basically just the same as them. So a quote from them is just, a segment from them. We're just a segment of this madness. We're not special. We're just another breath in some breathing universe, Meditate on the immensity. Yeah, I think you really should be meditating on the immensity. Maintain your sobriety. So there was just a long thing about Merkel in here.
Yeah.
About how great Merkel is and how calm she was. But again, I think a lot of these things are heavily oversimplified and, very anecdotal. But I mean, it's kind of an obvious point. Maintain your sobriety. Which in a way is very similar to the previous points. I think it's more like stay humble, don't get too full of yourself, which is kind of basically what a lot of the other ones are saying, like the disease of me almost is very similar to that point, as well as don't tell yourself a story, which is again a very similar point, which is, look, just stay humble, don't get too full of yourself. Very valid point, but he's dragged down to 3 chapters. So I'm just like, mate, what are you doing?
The for what often comes next, ego is the enemy. I feel like there was more than one of those called that.
Yeah, there are 3.
It's the one before each.
And or the end of each.
Yeah.
There's no at the end, I think.
But yeah, this one, another quote. This one I feel like I might understand it. Napoleon said, "Men of great ambition have sought happiness and have found fame." What he means is that behind every goal is the drive to be happy and fulfilled. But when egotism takes hold, we lose track of our goal and end up somewhere we never intended. I mean, I thought it was interesting just purely because maybe some of these men and women who was had great ambition, they were seeking happiness, they found fame. How many people with great ambition were seeking fame and didn't find either happiness or actually success?
I think that's an interesting question, but I think another interesting question is how many people don't do anything?
Also saying it's better to have great ambition no matter what you want from it than to have no ambition.
No, I'm saying I bet it's a minority of people, a real minority of people who strive for excellence, they make it, and it's not what they turn out to be. I think a much more common thing to happen in the world is you have big ideas, you don't do any of them, you kind of rise up your company, and then that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's a much more common thing. But I think it's for the minority that do experience this kind of a thing. I don't know. I haven't experienced it, so I couldn't say. But it seems like it can happen. It's a valid point, but it does also seem it's very simplified. It seems like once you get up there, fame and these kinds of things are going to be inevitable. It's about managing these things and focusing on the important things.
Yeah. I think it's almost like he maybe could have done without simplifying it, because it is like if you just took it at face value, which is you might have a really big ambition for something and you might take it somewhere and it might lead you to something completely different, and what you have to be able to do is to actually look at where it's gotten you, reassess and be like, is this what I wanted out of this, and then think, where can I go with this? So should we head into failure?
Yeah, let's head into failure.
Let's go into failure.
Failure is good. I think of the 3 macro chapters, aspire, success and failure, I think failure was my favourite one. I finished it so long ago, Mo.
Wow. I finished it approximately today.
Approximately an hour ago. Okay. Failure.
Did this even have a title?
The first one does.
Oh, it's just called Failure.
But what was in this though? 'Cause without a title, I've forgotten what's in it. Oh, it's about the lady who inherited the newspaper.
Catherine Graham.
Yeah. I think that's just not an interesting point.
What, the quote?
Is there a quote?
There's a quote, but okay. What do you think? Mankind. It argues mankind disposed to sympathise more entirely with our joy than with our sorrow. Do you think that's
so? Mankind sympathises more with joy than sorrow.
Yeah. So as in, although is sympathize even the right word? Shouldn't it be empathize?
Yeah, like I was about to ask you the same thing. Like, what does that mean exactly?
So what he's arguing is that basically because he's saying it's in mankind's nature to be able to sympathize, not empathize, with people's joy more than their sorrow. So then that means that because that's the case, I would prefer to tell you about my joy than my sorrow. And so in which case I hide my sorrows, which could be my failures, than instead of showing them. And he even goes into at one point, he says it here: nothing is so mortifying as to be obliged to expose our distress to the view of the public, and to feel that though our situation is open to the eyes of all mankind, no mortal conceives for us the half of what we suffer.
Like, I think I would agree with that. Well, my understanding of that is when it comes to typical social situations, you have to say nice things. You can't just drop your depression and your loneliness and all these things on people.
But I think it's. I mean, there's that awkwardness, but I think it's actually easier to empathise with somebody who's going through sorrow. But I'm saying I've flipped it. I'm saying it's actually easier to empathise with somebody going through sorrow than joy, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody's going through joy, you're just like, I'm so happy for you.
Sick.
Like, congratulations. Right? That's all. That's like, what else does he want? It's like a pat on the back.
Yeah.
That's about. Or you can talk to them about it.
Well done.
Oh, how many millions did you make? Or which university did you get into? Right? Mm-hmm. Like that can only go on a certain amount. Whereas with sorrow, even if that person doesn't want to bring it up, if they do, it's then actually easier to empathise. You can say, tell me all about it. Like, what can I do? Like, people, they do this with joy as well, but. So it's a moot point. But I was going to say, people will bring food round and stuff if somebody's like,
Well, yeah, but I think an interesting way to see it is like, if my mate's having a really bad day, night, whatever, I will sit up until the early hours in the morning, drinking with them, talking about the problem. But with happiness, you don't really do in the same way.
Well, you wouldn't you would run out of something to say for after 20 minutes. You'd just be like,
it's 2 o'clock, let's go to bed.
We've congratulated you about a record number of 50 times.
Yeah.
I mean, you could spend the night celebrating, but so I just.
But that's different. But then,
no, it's different. But that's the first thought that came to my mind was, where's he going with this? My preconceived notions immediately were resistant. But you're right, they're 2 different points. Yeah. But I just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I think, sorrow definitely is a very binding kind of thing. But I think your point was interesting, where you said, in the day-to-day, we're never gonna show to the public our sorrow. And I find that's it's almost quite... it's a bad thing, I think.
It is. It's really bad.
Like, at work, you rarely say bad stuff in the kitchen, right?
What about the food, or?
Well, no. When you're making a tea in the kitchen, and somebody else comes in from your floor or whatever, you would just talk about nice things. You would never drop into the... Even though that might be the thing that's most heavily bearing on you.
Yeah.
But then again, I guess there is a time and a place to be doing that, and work might not be the best.
Well, I mean, the people who I'm closer with at work, I will talk to you about. I don't mind talking to them about what's stressing me at the moment and stuff. Yeah. But then what I find generally is at work, it's almost like it's like a humorous cycle with your acquaintances at work. Yeah. It's just like Monday, Tuesday, you talk about what you got up to on the weekend. So you just tell, somewhere between 3 to 10 people, depending on how many people you bump into at the, coffee station, about your weekend, what you got up to. Yeah. Right. Then on Wednesday, there's kind of not really much chat because it's just midweek. Yeah. You're just halfway through the week. Yeah. And then Thursday and Friday, you're chatting about what you're going to do on the weekend. Yeah. And then you just repeat until you actually share some meaningful information with each
like
other,
some interesting thing,
and then you actually start to develop through that. But if not, you just continuously do this
cycle,
very satirical.
And like, are you content with this cycle? Like, is this cycle something that you're pretty happy with, and that you're
well, as many of the
enjoying?
people that I feel like I'm interested in getting to know more about, I will actually try and develop further. Like, you know, not just be satisfied with just being like, oh, how was your weekend? You know.
Yeah.
And then, but you know, I guess it can start with that. You say, how was your weekend? And then if there's something that you think is interesting, you delve deeper. But yeah, just a side.
Yeah.
Aside.
But what was I going to say? Totally forgotten. But do you think your conversations could be better at work? And do you think that would enrich your life? Do you think you'll make your day better?
I mean, to be honest, I've managed well. It still happens, but like, I'd say it's a smaller percentage of the conversations I have now in terms of like general chit chat. Generally, actually try and talk about something rather than.
Okay.
But I mean, and I think it does.
But I mean,
it does a bit.
You didn't really answer my question though. Like,
does it enrich your life? I think so.
Well, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be about an interesting topic. But say your conversational skills were just better, just better in general.
Are you saying they're bad?
They knew. That's why we're doing this. No. But like, do you think?
No, I think it does. I think it does, definitely, because I think at the end of the day, it's easy for us to consume ourselves in our own lives. And what I always find interesting is, like, I don't know, this whole idea of, like, you know, everybody has a story. And even though we shouldn't be telling ourselves stories, everyone has a story, right? And, like, you know, at the end of the day, you don't know what anyone's going through until you speak to them, until you talk to them, until you try and understand more about them and their lives. And
but then again, we're talking about the point of in the kitchen, we're not going to drop our depression and our
we're not. But you know, can you get to a point where somebody would speak to you about something like that?
Sure,
yeah.
But I mean, okay, fine, that's very, very valid. But if that doesn't happen, and you're not going to be having deep, meaningful conversations with, you know, the majority of the people in your office, say, or say half, say you're super charming and you can get, you know, to really know very well half, whatever. But the other half, or the majority of the conversations you're having aren't with people you're really tight with. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So, like, do you think it's like a skill that's worth developing, or do you think it is something that you can really learn to become better at that part of your life? Because I find that's quite a big part of the working environment, is having chit chats with people. I'm pretty shit chit chat, so it's kind of a topic that's on my mind. Like, how do I get better at this thing? You know, because I think if I was better at it, just a meaningless chat, you're going to end up developing better relationships via that.
Well, I think what I think is nobody likes meaningless chit chat. Like, generally, not many people do. Like, only people who like meaningless chit chat is people who don't want to make meaningful chat because they're probably bad at it, right?
No, I disagree.
Or because they don't want to talk to you. But so what I'm saying is, don't focus on getting better at meaningless chit chat. I don't think you want to, from the sounds of it. Try and focus better on meaningful chat and getting to that point with people who just want to, like, you know, meaningless chit chat. And I'm not saying like you're going to have DMCs by the, you know, in the kitchen. Or I've to be honest, only with my good friends I have had some at work, but I wouldn't, like, you know, just somebody you make chit chat with. You wouldn't have a meaningful, like a deep, meaningful conversation in by the coffee counter, you know.
Yeah, of course. No, but I mean, yeah, okay. But I think, but for example, my brother, he really likes small talk, and he's really good at small talk.
But like, what do you mean? Like, okay, so when he's small talking somebody, what is he talking about?
Just like any kind of bullshit, you know, like little cheeky joke, little comment on the weather, little just very minor things, even with like strangers and stuff. He's very good at that, and he comments that he really enjoys that. He likes that part of it. And like, I think, okay, you can say maybe you might not be good at everything, say, but I think that it is a big part of British life, especially, you know, British distance and whatnot, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess my thought is to get better at that, and that would improve your life probably relatively significantly, seeing as the time at work is so significant. There's such a significant proportion of your time is spent at work.
Okay. Maybe then, maybe I'm being biased because we have quite a lot of non-British people at work.
Okay.
Like we have quite a lot of Aussies and Kiwis, and they generally just love to chat. They're not about chit chat. They're about they just like to chat.
Oh really? Okay.
But
I think we need to define the difference between chat and chit chat.
I think chit chat. I guess chit chat is like making conversation for the sake of making conversation, as to not feel awkward that there is no conversation. So it's like talking about nothing so that you're talking, right?
Okay.
Whereas chat is like, it's more directed towards trying to have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, I mean,
you know.
Well, okay, but I think that we have a difference in definition. Obviously, you don't aspire for chit chat. You aspire for chat.
But how long is chit chat as well? Like,
I mean, chat can be.
No, chit chat, not chat.
No, as I'm saying, chat can be as long or as short as you want.
Yeah.
And chit chat, I guess, ideally, the purpose of chit chat is a transitioning zone from we're not talking yet to we're having chat. Right.
Okay. See, I was under the impression that it was a transitioning zone between, like, you know, you arrive at the, you know, coffee counter or whatever.
Yeah.
Somebody's there, and instead of standing in silence, you fill it with chit chat until you leave. You know, and there might be a little bit of you've actually finished what you've come to do, and then and then between that and going back, you actually stay for a bit of chat. You see what I mean? It's like the lift. Lift is prime chit chat area, and the reason why I say that is because a lot of people won't chat in the lift. It's like they've said it in Top Gear. Americans chat in the lift. British people don't. But that is prime chit chat like time. It's somewhere where, you know, you're like, the primary purpose is you're not there to chat. You're there to get from one place to the other, or you're there to get a coffee, you're there to get a tea, right? And in that time where your paths intersect, you're making chit chat, you know?
Okay.
Have I over-defined chit chat?
I kind of lost you for a bit. No, but okay. I mean, I think I see what you mean. That's kind of what I mean. It's kind of a transition zone. If the end goal is to have chat, or if the end goal is not even to have chat, you're just passing, I think you can still have a very small or short bit of communication that counts as chat. It's like one or two jokes that you tease them for something and then you leave, you know, quick, snappy. But does that count as chit chat? That's chat, surely. Because if you're saying the sole difference between them is one is it's shit conversation, one is it's good conversation. If that's your only difference, that's essentially the crux of the.
No, I think it's the length of time. I think it's the length of time.
No, I disagree. Because are you saying then you can't have chat in a short amount of time?
No, I'm saying chat follows chit chat, right?
Yeah, that's what I said in the first place. Like,
yeah,
chit chat is a transitioning zone from zero.
But it doesn't always transition.
Yeah,
and maybe that's to do with how good your chit chat is, but maybe it's also to do with whether that person wants or doesn't want chat.
Okay, yeah,
see what I mean?
Yeah, okay, agreed. So yeah, exactly. Chit chat is the procedures that you go through. We'll make this so cold and technical. Is like the stage you go through with the aim to get to chat, ideally.
Okay, so you. So you're saying two people enter. I'm just wondering. When people enter into chit chat, is it generally on the premise that they both want to get to chat if the chit chat's good? Do you think so, or do you think there are certain people who always enter chit chat with no intention to get into chat?
I highly doubt it's without intention to get into chat, or if their intentions are, I don't want to chat, it's because they feel they can't get there.
Okay.
That's what I would personally think. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, but maybe it is. That's actually an interesting definition. If you define, because then I guess reaching levels of chat depends on your confidence that you're gonna drive this chit chat into chat.
No, I think we've gotten somewhere because
I think it's interesting.
I'm not sure if I told you, but at one time I was waiting for the Circle line at South Ken, and the tube was delayed, and I ended up chatting to a guy who was like the director of some architectural firm.
Oh really? No,
Yeah, and like, you know, nothing came of it in terms of like, you know, I didn't contact him and say like, you know, nice, blah blah blah. Yeah. But as in, it went from chit chat, and then we just, you know, on the tube to where we were each going, we had chat. So I guess it does, you know, it wasn't all just chit chat, because.
Okay, yeah, I think there's a definition here that is a bit loose and a bit wrong, I think. But I think it's possible to go straight into chat. You know, I think if you start a conversation and it's good, you can be immediately in chat. I mean, I think you don't have to be talking about a deep topic to have a good bond.
Yeah,
you know, so it doesn't really matter about. But perhaps an interesting, perhaps a good analogy is something like surfing. You kind of have to paddle along. When the wave comes, you hit the wave and you go, you know, and then then you're talking. But perhaps if you're really bad, you kind of flap about and you can't stand up and you fall over. You know.
But for me, it's almost like there are actually now two surfers paddling. Because it's not just, you know, otherwise you're having if the surfing is the chat, you'd be having a chat with yourself if there's just one surfer. So it's got to be two, you know?
Okay, but
maybe one person.
It's just an analogy, for fuck's sake. No. But I see what you mean.
Maybe one person's chit chat is good enough for both of you to ride the wave. Of chat.
No, I totally agree that it's a mutual experience.
Yeah.
It's like dancing. It's like paired dancing. If one person is shit, it's just gonna be a shit dance. You know, but maybe one person is really, really good and competent. We just stop with the analogy.
Yeah, maybe does this say something about the book? Have we failed to communicate the chapter of failure because we let our ego get in the way, or because chit chat was interesting?
I think we should explore all interesting scenarios. I think that's partially what this should be. If this sparks of an interesting conversation, we surf the good. Stop.
We surf the chat. And then surf the net to see if a definition of chit chat has already been written. There probably has. I wouldn't be surprised. You know.
Okay. Let's stop. Okay. Alive time or dead time? I think it's good. I mean, alive time or dead time, basically.
Oh no! Wait. Can we please talk about this one? I think is a really interesting quote.
Okay.
Well, no, it's not a quote. It's just it is kind of a quote. So, as the financial philosopher and economist,
do you understand it then, Mo?
I do. George Goodman once observed, "It is as if we are at a wonderful ball where the champagne sparkles in every glass and soft laughter falls upon the summer air. We know at some moment the black horsemen, why do they got to be black, will come chattering through the terrace doors, wreaking vengeance and scattering the survivors. Those who leave early are saved. But the ball is so splendid no one wants to leave whilst there is still time. So everybody keeps asking, what time is it? But none of the clocks have hands."
What was that reference to again? I remember reading that, but I can't remember what the context is.
So it's just talking about how, talking about failure and about how, you know, we all kind of, in this in life, we generally, like, if the going is good, we don't generally want to get out, right? Mm-hmm. We want to keep it going until it's like, until we think it's like definitely time to get out, or basically we stay in until we fail.
Can you give an example of day-to-day life?
So I think this is generally this is talking about an economic crisis.
Ah, okay.
So like about how, like, if a crash is coming, people are like, we know we need to get out, but we want to stay in until like the last minute. It's for me, it's almost like, okay, when if you have like a few plans on one weekend, right, and you're not sure which one you're going to go to, then the good thing to do is to select one and tell people which one you can't make, right? But maybe it's human nature, maybe it's not, for us to want to keep our options open until the last minute at which we have to decide. But it's not just me. It's like, like houses as well. Like if you're looking for a place, right? Often you might have offers in a few different places, and then you'll like, when everything falls into place for that one, you pull out of the rest, and it doesn't matter who, the collateral for the other people, because you're just like, whatever. Like, I got the one that I wanted,
So you're a black horseman, hey? Is that what you're trying to imply, man?
I'm not the black horseman.
But I guess my understanding of that is, but when the good people don't, or we oftentimes will not know when to stop or when to pull out.
Yeah.
We'll often know, but I guess that just depends on who you are, and it depends on the situation. Because like for me, I've gotten quite good at like leaving a night out quite early. Because I'm like,
because the black horsemen are coming.
The black horsemen are coming.
But your clocks don't have hands, so how do you know?
Just by feeling.
Just
like pure
feeling.
instinct. No, but like, see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm quite good at that. What am I bad at? I'm quite bad at like things like training. So I often go a bit too hard and I injure myself, or I get tired. That might be an example. But I don't know. It's a nice, pretty quote, but I don't know what it's really saying.
On the meaning again.
Yeah, a little bit. I think you like your abstract things that make you go, and then it gives you full room to just meander off into the world of Mo and interpret it in like 700 ways.
But I mean, it's like, you wouldn't ever want a quote to be too rigid, You want there to be some sort of sense of interpretation, If a quote becomes rigid and like has one or two meanings, or just like one strict meaning, then maybe that meaning is like really good, but then it just means it's just one meaning.
Well, no, that's the difference between facts and art. A fact is a fact. We have this point. Here's my point. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can go, oh, but that also links to this point. Okay, but that's different. A point is a point. And art is down to your own interpretation. The viewers create meaning by viewing art. That may be different to what the artist intended in the first place. I guess that's kind of what you mean by a quote. In this case. Yeah. In this situation. So I guess in this sense, are you saying it's more like a piece of poetry or something that you like to interpret, and that's fine. But if we're saying we're trying to extract some information out of it and discuss it in a like scientific way, and it's like, what the fuck, like, what are you saying?
But I mean, it's completely scientific. I mean,
well, I mean, like
surfing analogy.
Okay. Anyway, the F is enough.
He will face a battle he knows not.
Which are you in the first?
He'll ride
first bit still.
Road he knows not. No, we can go to the next one.
No.
It's been quite a while, so
whatever, mate. I don't mind. Alive time or dead time. Basically, don't waste your time. When you have spare time, use your time wisely. End of story. The effort is enough.
Lifetime or Dead Time. Malcolm X. What a G. I didn't even know that about Malcolm X.
Oh yeah, same. I didn't know that either.
That's just like, I felt kind of disappointed in myself.
Why don't you tell the good one person that might still be listening what the Malcolm X thing is?
First line, Malcolm X was a criminal. How dare you say that? No, he was. And then essentially a lifetime was, or what he is saying is that he got handed this sentence, you know, and then he could have either let that been dead time, he could have let his ego.
So when Malcolm X was young, he was doing a lot of crime. He was selling drugs, and is that right? He was doing crime. He was a young man doing his thing in a racist America, and then he basically got caught, went to prison, and had the choice whether or not to change his life around, and he did that through using what they call a lifetime. So he could have just sat in jail, plotted on how he would get out, seek revenge, or, you know, or sit in the gym and just bench press.
But he said he spent all of his time reading.
Yeah.
And when he wasn't reading in the library, he was reading in his,
and he taught himself to read, right? He first taught himself to read.
Does it? I don't think it said that in this.
Really?
No.
I think he may have done.
Really?
Let's see. Oh no, maybe I mean. Pretty sure he taught himself to read. He taught himself to be a reader. Okay, never mind. Maybe he knew how to read.
Could he teach you how to?
Yeah. Okay, but basically, I think it is kind of an interesting point. It's like when you have spare time, use your time. Don't waste your time. It's like, okay, great, thank you. I feel I've learned so much.
Yeah, it's that, but it's also about. I mean, I hate saying it because it starts to feel cliche, but it's like, you know, not. So like we can be consumed with whether it's rage or, you know, like we're like, oh, life is unfair, like, you know, I've been handed this sentence or whatever, and it's almost about removing yourself from the situation and looking at it being like, okay, like whatever, like I've got this sentence, like I'm not gonna mope around in jail, or like it's about using it, you know. So yeah, but
yeah, I mean, okay, agreed. To put it into context, to put it for a particular situation, I think it is good to mention, and I think it should be formalized into this book, into this entire thing. I think it's good that he's formalized it. But I just don't have much to say on the matter, I guess. I think it's quite a hard thing to do, to be using the dead time that you may have, depending on who you are. You might be unemployed and you have loads of time, but if you have a job, it might be quite hard to utilize your dead time in an efficient way. And or it's almost like you need to find time for yourself, almost. I think that's an interesting point, perhaps. How do you find time to get more stuff done?
Not everyone gets.
You especially, Mo.
Not everyone gets a 7-year prison sentence and uses it.
Yeah,
know? So it's like there's almost two elements of that: getting the time and using it. So it's tough.
Yeah.
Okay,
right, that's a boring one. The effort is enough.
I wasn't sure about this chapter.
I didn't like this General Marshal guy at all. I thought he was... Belisarius, I mean.
Belisarius.
He just sounded just so obsequious. He sounded just like he didn't do anything about his bad situation. Like, you can do something, mate. Like, what are you doing? So long story short, there was a general under... Was it Alexander the Great? No. It was... I think it was a descendant of Alexander the Great.
Constantinople. No.
or something like that. Anyway, there was this general back in those days at the end of the Roman Empire who apparently was a very, very good general. He won many battles for his emperor, but the emperor was very paranoid, and the emperor felt that Belisarius would cause a coup, but I think he also thought most of his generals would have caused a coup because he was so paranoid. And long story short, the emperor gave Belisarius a really hard time by firing him from his post, then taking away all his resources and all these kind of things. And in the book, Ryan Holiday kind of goes through, but he just kept calm and just carried on with his job. And then at the end, he lived happily with his wife. But to me, that sounds like a really stupid thing to do, because if you are in a bad situation, you try and fix your situation. You know, you try and stand up for yourself and you do things. But I think this is probably a typical oversimplification that he's done to the story, to try and bend it to his point. You know, I'm sure that a lot more happened in the background of that story.
Yeah. I mean, but isn't there the argument that Belisarius could have actually, like, maybe Belisarius didn't have enough ambition. Like, okay, it says he had the chance to take the throne a few times. I'm not necessarily saying that was the right thing to do, but, like, you know, there must have been a reason why he was fighting, apart from just, this is the, you know, I wear the honour of the commander, like, you know, I'm just executing what somebody says. He must have had some, like, you know, maybe if he would have been the emperor, maybe he would have, like, saved loads of lives.
Yeah.
I mean, like, but then he was just like, oh, no, I'm just going to do what I'm told. Yeah. The effort is enough.
No, I think the point here is we don't have enough information about the actual story, so we can't really comment on it. However, the point of the chapter is often it's not about status, it's not about recognition, it's about doing the work that you think is the right work for you. Just putting in the hours, doing it daily, doing it weekly, or whatever it is that you do, and just go with it. And it doesn't matter if you're not receiving the recognition or the success, or maybe there is a glass ceiling, or whatever it is there is there for you. It's about just keep on pushing through no matter what. And then, I think that's basically the point, right?
Yeah, it also just kind of says, like, you know, there will be times where you do everything right and the results will be negative.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't jump off a cliff. Like,
that's a valid point.
I forgot one his name. John Kennedy Toole. I don't think he jumped off a cliff, but yeah. Mm-hmm. The author of A Confederacy of Dunces. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there's much more to say.
There's Fight Club moments, which I think is quite an interesting one. Fight Club moments is our next chapter, and it basically refers to the point in Fight Club where the main character's name, I forget. What's his name?
Not as in his alter ego is Tyler Durden.
Yeah.
Jack.
Not the alter ego. Is it Jack? No, it's not.
Jack, yeah.
Anyway, Edward Norton's character, it's the point where he hits rock bottom, essentially. It's the point where his apartment blows up and he has nowhere to go. And then he ends up fighting in the car park of that random bar. But the point is rock bottom points. And the author argues that rock bottom points often can be very good for you, because it almost forces you to reevaluate your reality and to look at what was wrong, to what wasn't working that you couldn't see at the time. He says to use rock bottom moments to your advantage, to readjust your whole paradigm and to move forward accordingly. So my initial thought to that is we should be doing more things to hit kind of local rock bottoms, if you like. Not global rock bottom, because then you're on the street, but we should be doing things in our life that humble us in a very kind of realistic and structured way. Like, for example, recently I've been doing jiu-jitsu, and that is very much humbling, because everybody just beats the shit out of me. So I'm quite new and everyone is more experienced than me, and they just, using technique, just beat me up consistently. Though I am getting better, it is an interesting thing to do, to realize how you're so bad at something and how you need to learn and reevaluate and all these kind of things.
Yeah, I think it's the other interesting thing I felt like I took away from this chapter was the fact that, you know, in the movies and in the stories and in the news, it's always like rock bottom is this big kind of not hallelujah, but like this like eureka moment where you're like, I've got to change everything, you know? Whereas in actual real life, it can be a much different process of reaching rock bottom. It might, you know, it may not happen as suddenly, it may not be as low a point, like you said, but it's like, you know, you have to recognize, is that actually a low point? Is this a moment that you should re-evaluate and reassess? It's not always going to be you're out on the street or, you know, a huge failure, your company's just, you know, gone into bankruptcy. It could be much smaller. But if we have this, it's almost like talking about a growth mindset, really, which is like, whenever we fail, are we looking at it as, how can we learn from this? How can we, like, why did we fail? Can we move forward? Can we improve ourselves?
Yeah, so maybe I guess the point kind of there is the very oversaid, go and embrace failure and embrace mistakes and go out and just try things and fail on projects and come up with really 100 bad ideas, you know? Maybe that's a takeaway lesson.
There wasn't much in Draw the Line.
I think the rest is pretty bad and generic. Though, that having said, I thought the very, very last page on page 210, I think that's almost the best way to be talking about ego. So at the very, very end of the book, right before the epilogue, he summarizes the entire thing in 3 lines, which I think is the best way to be talking about ego, which is vague and unspecific. Mainly because, as we discussed in our previous session, I think the ego is very undefined, and to try and attribute really complex phenomena and complex human behavior and reactions to this one thing, ego, is almost quite hard. It's almost like it's like, how do you separate the different components to really analyze the issue? But right at the end, I think there's a quite nice thing, because he summarizes in 3 lines. He goes, not to aspire or seek out of ego, to have success without ego, to push through failure with strength, not ego. Which I thought was good. It's very vague. It's up to an interpretation. Like, he couldn't fuck up there, you know. And yeah, I thought that was quite good, because by keeping it vague and not going through really bad examples, you kind of see what the general idea is, which is that there are 3 stages of a process, essentially. There is a birth process, a life process. There's like a growth process, a plateauing, successful living process, and then a death process. That's kind of how I would interpret this. So it's almost a cycle. It's almost quite organic. Doing projects, doing art, doing whatever it may be. And I think he summarized it there very clearly. So when you're growing, when you're aspiring, don't be egotistic. When you have success, when you're doing well, don't be egotistic. When you fail well, and don't be egotistic. So I think that is...
Yeah, I've got 1 or 2 more points from the last chapters. One of them is maintain your own scoreboard.
Okay.
And this was about Warren Buffett, who he says make a distinction between the inner scorecard and the external one. So I guess when I'm referring to scorecard, they're talking about, like, you know, how you judge yourself and how other people judge yourself. So, like, judge you. Sorry. So in terms of, like, you know, it kind of the chapter does sort of sound like it's saying find a failure in every success, but it's not. It's more about, you know, even when people are piling on the praise for a success, you have to almost humble yourself and realize that even if this is what other people see as a success, you might have other ambitions for that. So he says, make a distinction between the inner scorecard and the external one. Your potential, the absolute best you're capable of, that's the metric to measure yourself against. So it's about winning isn't enough. Anyone can win, but not everyone is the best possible version of themselves. I thought it was nice. I thought it was because I think sometimes he speaks about stuff, and then I feel like often it's the quote that makes the most sense.
Love your quotes.
I do very much. What happens when we find a book that's not quotable? I'm just not going to talk.
We extract the points.
Always love. Didn't really have much to say about that.
It's all very generic. I think like there isn't any interesting. Well, unless we spin off a tangent.
But there was another one which was so speaking about, he's talking about always love and how sort of its ego stops us from loving people in reaction to something. We let our ego get in the way, you know, and we react in a way that's not useful. So Frederick Douglass, he was traveling and was asked to move and ride in the back in the baggage car because of his race. A white supporter rushed up to apologise for the horrible offence. "I'm sorry, Mr. Douglas, that you've been downgraded in this manner," the person said. And basically Douglas wasn't angry about it. He replied saying, "They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. The soul that is within me, no man can degrade. I am not the one that is being degraded on account of this treatment, but those who are inflicting it upon me." Again, not necessarily much in the way of... Well, I guess that is a little bit in the way of... in relation to ego. But it's almost like often we're kind of like, you know, we take offence to things. And actually, what he's saying is it's the other person's actions who are causing a negative effect to them. And again, more on kind of the love, always love, is about our reaction again. So revulsion and rage. And kind of Ryan Holiday speaking about, think of somebody who you dislike, or something that you dislike, you know, whose name fills you with anger and rage, and then have these strong feelings really helped you accomplish anything. And, you know, that's an interesting question. Maybe that there are people who, like, you know, have had, for example, say it's like sexual assault happen to them. I'm not sure if the rage helps, but maybe that event with a clear head, I don't know, does that help them to accomplish anything out of that? Just thought it was interesting. Because it's easy to just kind of like just dislike somebody who's done something bad to you, and just, but then how has that actually, like, has that done anything to you? Has that helped you with anything? I
think it's definitely better to be trying to overcome those things and to try and treat everybody positively, no matter what they've done, or no matter how you feel them to be inadequate or whatever it may be. And I think that's probably a real virtue, to be able to have patience with all kinds of people.
The final one is, and I think this is probably a nice place for like a nice. It's in the epilogue.
Yeah.
And it's my friend, the philosopher and martial artist
Daniele Bolelli.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can know this guy.
Gave me a helpful metaphor. He explained that training was like sweeping the floor. Just because we've done it once doesn't mean the floor is clean forever. Every day the dust comes back. Every day we must sweep.
Mm-hmm.
The daily. It's all about the daily.
It's all about the daily, mate.
So
like, how many times did you read the book this week, Mo?
I read it, I think, like 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to put it into context, what Mo's affliction is. Mo is a very bright, very kind, loving man. However, he tends to cut all projects very close to the deadline. Very close, often going past them. So if our next podcast comes out late, you'll know why it's out late.
It won't be. Should we talk about the next book and wrap up?
Yeah, let's do that. Oh wait, let's first give a summary of this book. Would you recommend somebody read this book?
I might recommend somebody reads a summary of the book.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think there are a lot of interesting points in there, and I think a synopsis of this book is probably worth reading.
It's quite highly rated.
It generally is, but that's an interesting thing that I realised. So on the front cover, there's a quote by Robert Greene, who's a really big author in this kind of field, as well as on the back we have Stephen Pressfield, who wrote the War of Art. So he's got some really big names backing him.
Well, Robert Greene helped him with this book, you know.
No, exactly. Yeah. These are all his mates, though. He mentions how he knows these guys personally. So then immediately I think, wait, so they're kind of mates. So they're obviously going to help each other. So these quotes almost become diluted in their value.
No, but I mean, generally, like on Goodreads, I think it was above a 4. Like
really?
4.2.
Okay.
I think even on Amazon it was relatively good rating.
Really? But I think perhaps in general, books in general, they tend to take points and like twist them and take examples and twist them. They oversimplify and they drag out a single point into 4 chapters. I think that's really quite a common thing that happens.
Yeah.
And maybe it's more accepted in the book community, seeing it from fucking. Well, do we count as being from the academic community? Not really, I don't think so.
I think has some really interesting, really useful points. Mm-hmm. Maybe a bit longer than it needs to be. A lot of quite anecdotal and storytelling in parts. Mm-hmm. Good on quotes. Ticks the Mo quote box.
They're good quotes, but you won't understand.
But up for interpretation. I think maybe one of the things it says that inspiring yet practical. I'm not really sure it's practical.
I'd say it's definitely not practical. I don't feel
it's more general.
I think it's more it pointed out problems as opposed to offered solutions or even like baby steps forward. It didn't offer any of that. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's practical by any means. I think basically what he's done is he's taken a list of points that are all valid and he's put each point into a chapter. Whereas I think some of the points really could just be a bullet point, but he's found some story out there and twisted it and kind of summarized it in a certain way that fits the point, which I didn't really like personally. But overall, I thought the book was good.
Yeah, I think
good.
I think it's almost like a book that says its tagline the title, or even just a word in the title like too many times, it kind of gets a bit repetitive and cliched. And I think what Paul said quite a few times is how he'll present a complex problem and then just be like, it's ego, and I'd say in a lot of the parts the explanation doesn't necessarily match. It's not sufficient.
Yeah.
Okay. But then at the same time, I think some of the stories help with that. But then a story's a story. It's just one occurrence of something. Mm-hmm. I guess that's one thing that kind of got on my nerves is just the constant like X happened because of ego, and then just sometimes felt like I wanted a bit more of a better explanation, and not just this one word explaining the whole phenomenon.
And I did feel it oftentimes he would say it and just quickly move on to another point, as if he also kind of recognized that it was a bit of an oversimplification. But anyways, read a synopsis of this book online. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. The fight to master our greatest opponent. So that pretty much concludes our first ever podcast. If you're still there, thank you. Is that what you say? Hope you liked it. Hope you enjoyed it.
Give us some feedback on on how we've done, if you want.
In the comment section,
more analysis.
In the comment section, that is either above or below or to the right. We haven't decided what
platform.
What platform to upload
Probably
onto.
SoundCloud, maybe.
I think SoundCloud. Yeah, I had a little research. But we're definitely doing one next month at the beginning of the month. We are doing Sebastian Junger's Tribe, which talks about PTSD. It talks about soldiers. It talks about Native Americans. It talks about tribal communities. But I think ultimately it talks about humanity and our need to belong, and how Western society has caused quite a lot of alienation and loneliness through its affluence. And it talks a lot about Native Americans and soldiers, and how their camaraderie really bonds them together and gives them a real satisfaction and meaning in life. So we are reading this quite short book. I will finish it soon. Mo will be done on the 28th of February.
I think I could probably, now that I'm in, like, it was our first book, and I feel like I can. It's about the daily sweep. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
I'm gonna start sweeping
100%,
daily.
100%.
Not my room. That could do with the sweep as well. But I don't know. I feel like I'm optimistic I can read this in 2 weeks. Under 2 weeks, I reckon.
I'm gonna hold you to that. I'll hold you to that.
Book a week.
Alright, cool. Thank you, y'all. See you later, bitches.